is in a crisis because a lot of ministers are resigning and things like that. And the reality is that Chavez's popularity, even from opposition polls, is between 50 and 60%, and that's a miracle because Chavez is in his 11th year of government. And you might say that he might be like all tired, I mean, in the public perception, but his popularity always has been around that, even bigger. So Chavez's popularity is not at stake. Also, what they say about the resignations, they made a big deal of the resignation of the vice president, but the reality is that the vice president in Venezuela is not a key figure in the politics of the country. And they have been talking about some resignations that are not really resignations, but they portray them in the media here as resignations, trying to show that something is happening that is not really happening. The recent one was with the health minister that they say that resigned because he didn't want to have Cubans in the government. And it happens that that guy was the chief of the Social Security in the country, and he resigned, but he's back in his old post. He went to Miami, or he's still working for the government, but you hear headlines everywhere saying that now I resigned the Minister of Health in Venezuela, and that shows blah, 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 blah. So this is one of the points that is right now in the media. I have to talk about the opposition maze. I have to recognize that we are not perfect as a government in Venezuela. We commit mistakes, but the opposition is worse than us. That's the reality. And maybe if we have a strongest opposition, we might do things better. But the reality is that the opposition is a mess. They are right now fighting among each other in Venezuela, trying to be appointed as candidates for the legislative elections that we have in September. And they are fighting, and they were talking about that they create a unity committee or something that, and right now each party is appointing his candidate without primaries and things like that. And the latest news about that is that I hear is that in some places of the country the opposition is going to have primaries to select, but that's going to be like in a few, like a small percentage of the electoral map of the country. And by the contrary, the government recently announced that all the candidates for the PSUV, which is the government party, are going to be elected by primary. That happened yesterday or before yesterday. And that's an important news. What else? The media and the student demonstration, they're right now talking about what happened with RCTV again, and that we closed for second time the channel that was already closed, and those things. And happens that that channel since last year was notified several times that the government have this law, they was trying to implement this law, the law of we call it Ley Resortes, that regulates on how what is shown in different schedules in the TV in Venezuela, and that was planning to apply also for cable channels. And that channel always defined itself as an international channel, when the reality is that that is a Venezuelan channel. And being classifying itself as an international channel give them the opportunity of not broadcasting the national anthem that by law should be broadcasted every 6 hours in Venezuela, not following the child restriction hours for some programming, and they didn't follow those things. No broadcasting national ¿cómo se dice? Cadenas? Chains, I mean, public broadcast of authorities of the country that have to be broadcast by law in Venezuela. Of course, Chavez is among, I mean, Chavez's speeches are among those things, but there are other things that are informed through those chains. I don't know if that's the correct name.
This is the message.
But the reality is that 6 channels went out of the cable system in Venezuela. 4 of them immediately react and present the authority all the paperwork that they need to be being put back in the air. But RCTV didn't do that until last week, a few days ago, that they finally, after they create a maze and they mobilize all the students all over the country, they went to the authority and they present the paperwork. But in that paperwork that they introduced, they again present themselves as an international channel. So yesterday the government told them, listen, you are not an international channel, you are a national channel, so you have to comply with the rules.
They operate nationally, because of that they have to comply.
Yes, because of the content, basically, they show. It's not because they are, it's very complicated, there are technical things defining which channel is an international channel and which is a national channel, but mainly we have to say that RCTV is a national channel and they are trying to portray themselves as international for not following the Venezuelan rules. So most of the other 5 channels are already broadcasting, but RCTV is not broadcasting. And that's part of the play that they play. And because of that, they mobilize a lot of students in the country that didn't demonstrate for budget for universities or for budget for buildings in university. They were protesting for having RCTV in the air again, mainly, and that's crazy. And when you see those demonstrations and you see, I mean, who are those students, you clearly see that they are part of the middle class or the upper class. They are mainly students of private universities in the country. And you might say, oh, well, they are a student. I have to recognize that they are a student, of course, but somehow that reflects that the class struggle that we have in the country. I mean, that reflects that those are the sons or the same kids that usually has been opposing Chavez government since a long time ago. So you don't see anything new behind those demonstrations. I already talked a little bit about the primaries and the unilateral selection of candidates for the legislative elections that we have in September. I have to talk about the September elections. They are going to be very important, especially because the last legislative election in Venezuela was a victory for the Chavismo, not because we are very good, but because the opposition retreated and they didn't participate in the election. So after that, we gained control of like 98% of the Congress, or something like that. And that's because they retreated and they commit that mistake. And they, after 4 years, realized that they are not going to lose again, and they are moving very actively to trying to gain those spaces that they lost 4 years ago. Of course, they are going to gain the estimations that I've been showing from some people, from politicians in Venezuela, indicates that they are going to have, some Chavistas say like 20%, I believe that that's too optimistic, but something between 20 and 40% is the Chavista perspective of what they are going to gain from the National Assembly, the percentage of the Assembly that they are going to win. So they are battling among them to get those deputations in the Congress in that election.